Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Yeah, today let's unpack a story that might seem small on the surface, but speaks to a much bigger issue in South Africa. Now, according to the Zimbabwean Human Rights Commission, Zimbabwe has detained 66 undocumented documented immigrants, 66 illegal immigrants. Among them, there are people from Ethiopia, Pakistan, Burundi, the UK, and 7 South African nationals. And they are not being detained in an immigration detention center, they are detained in prison. Yep. This announcement came out of the back of ActionSA's as Anthony Trollip told the Newzroom Afrika that it's time for South Africa to amend South Africa's constitution. So let's listen to him speak about that because he spoke of the similar issue that I told you when I posted a few days ago, reminding South Africans that they need to actually put in a submission around this constitution. And the problem we've always had, all of us South African, is this phrase that South Africa belongs to everyone who lives in it. And we've always had a problem with that phrase. And we've seen now that phrase has actually been big problems, the root of all evils in terms of what's going on now in South Africa around immigration in general. And the people that comes to South Africa in a way to exploit South Africa rather than to actually um, provide the skills. Because when you migrate to a country, it's an exchange. You are providing yourself to the service of that country, your skills, in exchange of what that country is going to offer in terms of the lifestyle, the income, the safety, and other issues. You don't just come to the country and you want to exploit them and use their services, but without anything in return, without actually working and paying taxes and actually exploiting the services like healthcare, like education, and you're not paying any single cent for that services to be there for you. That has been a problem with South Africa, and this is the problem that was brought by ANC. This constitution, the phrase that South Africa belongs to everyone who lives in it. No, it's not. And Anthony Trollip spoke to the Newzroom Afrika yesterday. I was about to post I was just before this lady spoke again to Newzroom Afrika and having this interview. I was going to post a video of Anthony from ActionSA. ActionSA, think about it as a centre right party, a true centre right party. It's not left centre right. So they're speaking about this issue. They've been on this issue for a while now, and I'm so glad. But the same issue that he spoke about is the same issue that I raised in my submission. And I hope all of you South Africa have done that. Many of you complain about people who are undocumented, but you don't do anything. It's not gonna change if you don't actually write a letter. You don't put submission. What do you want about the Constitution? It's for you. It's the Constitution. It is a it's a law that's meant to govern, tell us how we should live amongst each other. Okay, within the community. It's the supreme law of the land. So if you don't contribute to it, but you are there complaining, oh illegals, but you haven't put any submission, that's yeah, you're not serious because it's not about talking, it's about action. It's about behavior and action, what you do. And so let's listen to Anthony Trollip being interviewed yesterday about this, okay?
Welcome back. More than 70% of patient files at the Johannesburg clinics reportedly belong to foreign nationals, and that's according to ActionSA's parliamentary leader Athol Trollip. The claim comes as the party tables a series of proposed constitutional amendments aimed at addressing what it describes as South Africa's growing immigration challenges. ActionSA argues that the country's generosity and limited public resources are being stretched to the limit. To discuss the party's proposal further, I'm now joined by ActionSA Parliamentary Leader Athol Trollip. Athol, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. What's at the core of the proposals that ActionSA is making here with regards to the constitutional amendments?
Good morning, Eldrin, and good morning to the viewers. Firstly, annually there's a call for people to make constitutional amendment submissions to the Parliamentary Review Committee. We have done that, and this particular submission deals primarily with our preamble of the Constitution, where it says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. We aim through our submission to address the persistent misrepresentation of this clause. And the example that you gave is a perfect example. South Africa belongs to all of its citizens and all permanent residents and all legal immigrants. But it doesn't belong to people who are here illegally. And some of the generosity expressed in that preamble of our Constitution to say it belongs to all who live in it are expressed in the Bill of Rights. And in the Bill of Rights, for example, there are three areas that we raise in our submission. Firstly, the right to housing, or if you're removed from where you live, the right to emergency temporary accommodation. That is a right given to all South Africans in the Bill of Rights, stemming from the preamble. The other one is the right to education, and we've seen that our schools are full, and South African citizens are battling to get their kids into school because the Constitution makes provision for immigrants, legal and illegal, to send their children to the nearest school. And also in the case of healthcare that you mentioned now, where our healthcare facilities are overrun, taking care of the needs of illegal immigrants. Now, we don't want to turn our back on anyone in this country, and we really admire the noble intentions of the preamble that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. But charity really begins at home. And we want the Constitutional Review Committee to look at these intentions of the preamble and those three particular areas of the Bill of Rights to make sure that South Africans get into the front of the queue and not the back of the queue.
Yeah, what would the Bill of Rights read like, for instance, if you were to exclude foreign nationals or undocumented foreign nationals when it comes to schooling, as an example, and access to education? What do you see that amendment read as in the Constitution?
So we're actually saying that the committee should duly consider amendments that introduce similar clarifying revisions to those that we propose. So what we're saying is if you fix the preamble and you say that South Africa belongs to all of its citizens and legally represented people who have, South African residency or are here on legal immigration status. You need to clarify that, because if there is no clarification, it simply says that all the rights that are in the Bill of Rights apply to people who live in this country, whether they've come here legally or illegally. And we know that we have a massive problem with illegal immigration, and we haven't been able to tighten up our borders. So we're saying we must tighten up our constitutional provisions to make sure that South Africans are put first, because the preamble of our Constitution is primarily focused and taking care of its citizens. And then in the Bill of Rights, the citizens, as I said, should be at the front of the queue, not the back of the queue.
Yeah. Do you think maybe the target should be dealing with our porous borders instead of trying to amend the Constitution? Because as you said, that the idea itself is noble. However, though, we do have an immigration crisis in South Africa.
What has happened is that we've got so many illegal immigrants in our country. Nobody really knows how many, but, it's certainly over between 5 and 10 million, if not more. And this has placed additional strain on South Africa's already limited public resources and undermined the state's ability to prioritize the needs of its citizens. So it's a fact of life. Those people are in this country. Controlling borders now doesn't obviate the situation that we've got millions of illegal citizens in this country already that are here. Therefore, we believe that we need to relook at how we prioritize the rights of our own citizens. And, we've said, for example, Eldrin, a carefully considered revision is required to clarify the original intent of this noble principle and to prevent its misappropriation. And what we're seeing is a misappropriation of the noble intent behind the preamble, where we have illegal foreigners in this country making use of the Bill of Rights that are intended for South African citizens. For example, if I travel abroad to the United Kingdom, or if you travel abroad to the United Kingdom tomorrow and you fall ill and you do not have health insurance, you don't have the right to go to the national health insurance in the United Kingdom and claim the same benefits as a citizen of the United Kingdom. So, we're saying that we must also do the same in our country, put our citizens' rights first, make sure that South Africans are put first.
Yeah, the other argument that has always been made is South Africa is a signatory to a number of international treaties, as well as Memorandum of Understanding and international law as well. Do you think that that too would then have to be reviewed?
No, we don't say that we want to undo those, being signatory to those treaties. What we're saying, and I've just given you an example about falling ill in the United Kingdom. If you fall ill in the United Kingdom as a non-citizen, or if you're there as an illegal immigrant, you do not have the right to access national health insurance. But in this country, you have the right, regardless of where you come from, regardless of your immigration status, you can go to any clinic and get health service and give birth, for example, in a hospital. You can go to any school close to where you live and send your children to that school, and they have to be admitted according to a constitutional court judgment. And you can claim emergency temporary housing accommodation, or even claim housing accommodation if you aren't a South African citizen. Now, we believe that that's way too generous. We can't afford that. And that wasn't the intention of the preamble or the Bill of Rights in South Africa. Those provisions are meant to be there for South Africans, not people who have come and into South Africa illegally. We've proven to be the sump of Africa. And in other African countries who can't create employment for their people and their population growth, they end up in South Africa. We also can't create enough employment for our own South Africans. We've got record unemployment. And we also have a massively quickly growing population. So we need to start looking at charity at home first, and not extending the rights to people who aren't in this country legally.
So as you've heard for Anthony Trollip, that the phrase, the clause in that constitution, it's a problematic. And he's actually picked up, many of us have picked up, this is not new, that is the problem. Why was this clause being there? What was the reason that ANC put this clause during the dawn of this new democracy? For what reason? And we're seeing that is the cause, it's a problem, because the government cannot put laws that restrict and that deter illegal immigration into South Africa. No matter how much they do, a lot of stuff that are there now that you provide for people who are illegal are incentivizing them to come. There is more incentives for illegal immigrants to come to South Africa, and so they're always going to try because there's an incentive for them to do so.
The persistent challenges of irregular migration in southern Africa, Zimbabwean authorities have detained 7 South African nationals along with 59 individuals from various other countries for allegedly entering the country illegally. The group is currently held at the Harare Remand Prison as confirmed by the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission following a recent inspection. The commission has called for their immediate deportation. This incident underscores the ongoing issues of border security and undocumented migration in the region. In response, Zimbabwe and South Africa have intensified joint border patrols, particularly along the Limpopo River, to combat illegal crossing and smuggling activities. Let's now speak to the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, who recently visited the prison, Jessie Majome. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Jessie joining us live from Harare. Following your inspection that you have done and your communication to the Correctional Services Department, has there been any action that is being taken to ensure that those that are incarcerated currently are deported back to their home countries?
Yes, I would say that that is the case, but also highlight that there are from time to time people who are detained in Zimbabwe's prisons, like these 66 that we found on this day, because our Zimbabwean immigration law provides that if an immigration officer suspects that a person, for good reason, has entered the country illegally, they may arrest them, and then they will require that the prisons detain them in a remanded prison for people waiting for trial. And so they should detain them for at least 14 days while they are verifying their status. And it is our hope that they are continuing to do so that they can be released or deported while they're investigating. And it's a problem that we continue to have because Zimbabwe has yet to create detention facilities for irregular immigrants that are not prisons, but our Immigration Act for now requires that prisons must take those particular people.
Yeah.
And we are working with the immigration authorities as well to ensure that this problem is solved once and for all.
Yeah, but with this particular cohort, was there confirmation that they will be released?
This issue is a routine issue. They do get released eventually because prisons doesn't also want them in prisons because they are not held in terms of the criminal law. So they don't stay there forever. It's always a cycle. There will be people because of the nature of irregular migration, I think that Africa has to address. There will be people it happens a lot that there are people who cross borders illegally and they do get released. The prisons authorities also liaise as immigration with the embassies of the various countries. So there are certain countries whose embassies are very proficient about processing the deportation of their migrants. In Malawi in particular, the Malawi embassy in Zimbabwe does so a lot. It visits prisons and then it makes sure that its nationals that are in prison and detained for immigration are processed and released. So it's a process that works between the prison service, the immigration officials, as well as the countries if they have embassies. So we are assured that this is happening, that the processing of the release of these particular immigrants is done. But like I said, they will, it's a consistent issue. These ones will come out, some more will come in, and until we will solve the immigration issue, but also create that the immigration authorities in Zimbabwe established immigration holding like stations that are not the prison, because these people should not be in prison. They are not, they are not, in terms of the law, they are not awaiting trial because they are not being charged with a criminal offense per se, but they've come into the country in a manner that appears to be, for all intents and purposes, illegal.
Yeah, so speaking there about the repatriation centers and why those are important to have in place. But in conclusion, speak to us about juxtaposing the immigration crisis or irregular migration situation that Zimbabwe is facing currently. And how do you compare that to, for instance, how South Africa is also dealing with a high number of Zimbabweans that are currently in the country undocumented?
Right. It appears both our countries have immigration problems. So Zimbabwe usually serves as a transit point for immigrants from all over. Like in this case, we have the highest number of these 66 that we have. That 16 are from Burundi, 12 are from Ethiopia, and then 8 are from Malawi, and South Africa is next with 7. And then there's 1 from Libya, 1 Mozambique, 1 from China, 1 from Pakistan, 1 from Taiwan, and 1 from France, and 1 from the United Kingdom, and 1 from Cape Verde. So most of these are from Africa, and South Africa and Zimbabwe are countries that that are also experiencing migration issues. But what is interesting is that these ones are from South Africa. There's usually an assumption that that in fact, that's the usual trend, maybe. But human beings migrate for various reasons, and I happen to be, as the chair of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, a member of the migration working group of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions. We have a working group that we have established in order to ensure that migration in the continent is humane and that it is human rights based. So we need to all work together to ensure that human beings continue to experience their dignity, because people have the right to freedom of movement. But because migration is what human beings do from before history, but we need to make sure that it's handled in a manner that doesn't criminalize people necessarily. In fact, doesn't criminalize them, but also gives them the opportunity to enjoy their dignity, the ones in the host country, but also so that people living in the host country do not feel that are not pressured to think that immigrants must be kicked out, but that there should be dignity and rights for those in the host country from immigration, and also those that are migrating. I'm sure we can do better as Africa through the through our protocols, so that we do not, because a lot of these actually these borders are from colonialism, and Africa has this common problem. But the dignity, the equality, and the freedom of human beings is what should be always realized. So we need to work better together to ensure that the positives of migration are extracted for Africa. Even also as Africans also go to other continents, a lot of migration happens in Africa, and we need to do better. And in the Zimbabwean case, we need to change this, need to change the law so that immigrants are not detained in places like this. And then we need to work against xenophobia anyway in Africa, so that the dignity of all Africans is experienced whatever place they move, and that they also move lawfully, and our laws also ensure that it's for the good of those in the host country, equally with those that are migrating. It can be a win-win for all. Let's work towards this from a human rights perspective.
Jessie, thank you so much for making time for us. Jessie Majome is the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. So,
yeah, of course, we must ask, this question. Why are so many Zimbabweans in South Africa? So because Zimbabwe's own economy and political systems have collapsed under authoritarian rule, corruption, and mass unemployment. That's a tragedy, but it's one that Zimbabwean government must take responsibility. And yet, too often, when South Africans raise these issues, they are always accused of xenophobia. That's what South Africans are demanding. They want a functioning public services and a fair labor practice, because they really want to have that. There's a growing frustrations that every time South Africans try to fix their country, and in other actors, it's other actors, including some from neighboring states, who resist the change, and that dynamic can't be ignored for me. That that her role now coming out, that I didn't even think that Zimbabwe had a human rights body. How can you be a human rights body and still put people who are illegal immigrants into prison? And you say that you are, you're going to have some kind of moral authority when your country imprison illegal immigrants, put them into prisons, and you're going to have moral authority to tell South Africans that they don't want to have illegal people in their country. Yeah, I mean, so this is not a call for hostility, to be honest, but it's a call for clarity. We need to be, not a call for hostility, it's a call for clarity. South Africa must secure its borders, must enforce immigration law, ensure that its citizens are not continuously deprioritized in their own countries. We just government of South Africa must make sure that South African citizens are not continuously deprioritized in their own country. At the same time, Zimbabwe must take accountability for the condition that put its people out, not rely on South Africa as a pressure value. That's what I don't like, not relying on South Africa as a pressure value. They must address their own issue that they have themselves. Because if we continue this path where one country does the detaining and the other carries the burden, we risk fueling the very xenophobia the commissioner warned about. The only thing that she's talking about, yeah, she's for her country, she only has 66. All right, South Africa has millions of Zimbabweans who are illegal. Okay, and those 66 are detained in prison. They're not walking around. And the very idea of that is the very thing that will fuel the very xenophobia that she's warning the South African people about. Obviously, this is addressed to South African people because of what the opposition been saying all this time about these illegal people were in South Africa. So it's addressed to them in a way that it's been, polished in some to sound like it's not. Because really, if you, as Zimbabwean, you could detain 66 people in prison, and and then you act like you got a moral authority while it detains 66, while South Africa has about millions of illegal in Zimbabwean in South Africa. Yeah, the very idea of that's the very thing that would actually fuel this xenophobia that she's talking about. We need really policies based on facts, not emotion. Policies must be based on facts, not emotion, that there are boundaries, not guilty. There are borders. There are laws that are different every country in Africa. And cooperation, not blame shift, is very important in this case. Because as she said, a lot of them comes along that route, along that path of Zimbabwe into South Africa. Okay, let's know your thoughts. Is South Africa doing enough to protect its sovereignty? And was the timing of Zimbabwe's announcements, Zimbabwe's Commissioner of Human Rights, coincidental, or is it a calculated ploy by Newzroom Afrika and this Zimbabwean? Because it seems to be a program that supports these illegal people. My observation is observing from my home here in Australia, it looks like this Newzroom Afrika is very much in there. So we need to look at them very careful, just like Helen Suzman Foundation. We need to keep an eye on this Newzroom Afrika. Something dodgy about them. So one thing that I think is going on with these 7 South Africans, I suspect, I got my hunch, again, look at the issues around, knowing what's going on there. I've been studying this illegal migration in South Africa around people smuggling. I suspect these P7 South Africans who are there, they either were the people who are involved in these people smuggling, the smuggling ring. Because we, like in Australia, a lot of these smuggling ring have either the citizens, people have become citizens of Australia that were doing that, and then working with the other people who were smuggling people across. And then maybe then this time they were all meeting in Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe is the route that they all come in through South Africa. That these South Africans would have moved from South Africa into Zimbabwe to pick up these people that are there as illegals into South Africa, smuggle them through into South Africa. That's my hunch. My hunch. Bookmark this video. I would like to know who these South Africans were. Would you like to know who they are? Those ones who are in them. It's either they are they're part of the smuggling ring, or smuggling Ethiopians and Pakistani and Bangladeshian and all of them into South Africa, or they are people with fake South African passport. That's what I think. There's either those two things, these 7 South African that she's talking about. But I'll be following this story again. Try to keep an eye on it. Remember, here we look into beyond the headline. What's underneath the headline? What makes the story? Not what they say, but what is the background of the story? This one, we'll be talking about it because there's a lot more to it than just, the story about 7 South Africans who are detained versus how many 5 million to 15 million illegal immigrants living in South Africa, straining the healthcare system, straining the school, building the public school system. I mean, come on. Every country must take responsibility of their own citizen. Look at Ibrahim Traore. The reason why we love Ibrahim Traore is because the man is the man for his people. He's a man, he's a president of the country. He's looking after the Burkina Faso people. What can you hate about that? That you got a president that looks after his own people. So why don't you just look at him and mirror what he does so you can look after your own? Just what he's done. There's no reason why Zimbabwe can't do what Ibrahim Traore is doing. There's no reason why they wouldn't be able to do that. But it's the corruption all of these countries get involved in. If you're doing what Ibrahim Traore was doing in Burkina Faso in nearly less than 5 years, you guys been there for how many years? And you got all the people all over the world not doing that, not looking after them. So no, it's time for you all to take your own responsibility.